Yeah, as you can see, I may have added where everybody's supposed to be placed. So, for instance, for the lowest tier, we have the L for Lucy. This tier list was made when the Magic Town came out, but I had already created that list. So, L for Lucy is you just wasted your goddamn gems, you idiot. Waste is actually like okay, it's more like L for Lucy is like you're hurting yourself. Waste is you wasted your gem. Doo doo is they're fine, but it's a pile of crap. Trash is just throw it out. Bad is like you can get away with it, but you're being bad. All right is like what you really should be going for, and is supposed to get is the units that you need in this game. Like everything else is so extra that's why the bottom of the tier list exists. It is not to trash you leaderboard kids or to hurt anybody's feelings if you already have the mythic. If you get a mythic or get a legendary and you it's one of these characters at the bottom of the list, good for you. I'm saying what to go for or not what not go to I can't even talk. What not to go for when you have gems. Now, another layer to this as well, and this is like the new spin I want to put on the tier list is I'm going to be talking more numbers this time since a lot of the high tiers and strong characters are so ludicrously strong that it'd be a disservice to not put them higher on the list because a lot of people have been getting kind of complaining when I post these lists and say stuff along the lines of dude, I did the dungeon or dude, I did the raid. I did the work. Stop like saying bad things about this character. It's not as bad as you're saying. So for characters that I would normally tier in the L for Lucy as like a colossal waste of time and it's a trash unit, I will be bumping up because there's people that do those things and do those extra services that noobs aren't really willing to do. I'll place where I think their characters are more deserved, but just to let everybody know now, if the more work you put into a character, the more I'm expecting work to come back from the character. All right? So for instance, if you get a character like the newest one for example, the 1% drop in the new raid, yeah, the payout for this new character because you it's kind of like the end you're at the end of the road here. This character can't carry you through everything because you've already beaten everything. This character must be so good that in the next update they pop off. Like characters that we've seen in the past, like Kit or Lucy or Jelly. The character if we get them as the last final thing, when the new updates hits, these characters should be the characters that power through you so that you can get the new best stuff. Whether that's through a buff or a nerf, and we'll be talking about buffs and nerfs because a couple characters actually have gone up or down because of buffs and nerfs. And without further ado, we're gonna start this thing. Starting out the list, we're going left to right instead of the what we did before where I go and then I decide who goes where. I'm just going to be plopping them wherever. So this one's going to be a little messy. However, I'd rather go from rarity because it gives you a gauge on when the character came out. And it makes it easier to kind of talk about them. So one of the first characters you'll be getting is like commons. So if if you are at all far in this game, commons are essentially irrelevant. But if you're new, most of these commons are helping you through Namek. So for somebody like Krillin, it's bad. These are bad. But he's is as high as C tier because these are something that you're gonna have to tackle and you're gonna have to like work with what you got because the codes are not gonna be enough. So he's already like here as a bad, but you just have to learn some of these earlier characters before you start getting your actual loot. This goes for almost every common you pull, whether it's stuff like Luffy that you start out with, or Goku, or Naruto, whatever it gives you, to something like Krillin when you're spinning for something that you want and you have to fill in an open slot. Understanding what these commons can do for you can make it so that you beat a level. And speaking of which, uh, this will be my first L for Lucy. Um, Nezuko is a terrible common, and this unit got a skin, which is why she's even on this tier list. And since she got a whole ass skin, what do you get for doing all them jewel quests? This is the most common skin, and this is one of the most common characters, but she does no damage. So, unless you're starting out the game and you just want a cosmetic to pimp out your character really quick, she doesn't do anything for you. Where somebody like Krillin is attacking every like 3 seconds as a hill. Alright? We're not going to go too in depth on it, but don't go out of your way for this common, like, at all. Now, commons that you should go after is Sakura. She's actually alright. I'll put her as high as A. The reason why Sakura is alright is she costs 600, which is really cheap. You can actually place her wave 1, but it won't do anything. And what this character does is give whatever characters in proximity, hill or ground, she actually got a buff where you can place her on the hills now. I don't know if it's like a 10 or 20%, but if you were to put it on a character that has 1800 attack on placement, she'll buff it up to 2000, but it's definitely a percentage update because those same characters that get from 18 to 2000, when they're hitting for 27, they'll go to 30k. And since it's such a cheap option and you're only probably specking one character a mode outside of Infinite. In Infinite, she's, unless you have literally nothing else to add, she's actually terrible. But in most of the stories, raids, and stuff like that, she's an easy support character to slap on your own characters as well as your allies' characters to make sure everything goes smooth. Now, for some people, that might be like a very high tier for this unit, but is a common. Is a common to essentially fill an empty slot that otherwise would be unoccupied, or for a unit that you're basically wasting your money on. Because for her upgrades, it's literally 600 twice, 1200, and it's an AoE that can cover up to 20 characters. So you'd be doing your team, especially as a noob that has nothing, a very big service bringing this character along if you happen to get it off of a summon ticket or something. Next is Speed Cart. This one goes without saying. Actually, I'm going to put Sakura probably at the bottom of alright. Speed Cart is an amazing character. I want to put him S tier, but units have gotten so costly that I actually don't like opting for him anymore. Like I just did in Infinite, and even with Bulma, it wasn't enough. And double farming is just uneducated. He is an epic that almost every noob or player that's like struggling with the story needs to snipe instead of Bulma. If he ever comes in the shop, even if the shop is dog shit, you should pick him up as your farm unit for a while and just hold off on Bulma until you're doing whatever metagame we're in. So right now we're in the cursed one, which is what this tier list will represent. And if you just so happen to pick up this guy, it'll make your game a whole lot easier. In fact, some people like the ease of his gameplay so much that it actually makes them worse players. So understand that he's a very good snipe, but don't overkill it with the farming. Understand the power of your units, and don't let this unit be your crutch. This is why he's not an S tier. Because he's not a crutch. Farming units are not a crutch. They're necessary things, but understand how much you can get away with without farming before you go full throttle with it. Next in the epic department is Jotaro. I'm going to put him a little lower than Speed Cart. I've heard only good things about this unit, and he was actually the unit I used to carry myself all the way up to Marine Forward. He's an epic that if you snipe, you'll get a CC. There's one other epic that I have down here that does it, but his CC is a time stop, which is a complete freeze, and his DPS on the ground is a very swift, like a Diet Coke Dio. Except when you go time stop, his attack speed doesn't get any slower. and it's a manual one. So you'll get to choose when and where you're doing this. And like I said with the leaderboard, there are people that use this unit to literally climb leaderboard because it's a quick and easy buy to sell because he costs like 3 grand to do the whole crowd control. So this is another unit that if you pick it up, especially if you have a slot open or if you need to add CC to your team because their power isn't enough, he's a very easy grab to just cover that, like to just to put a band-aid on otherwise a boo boo that you call your squad, and these guys fill those roles pretty good. For another CC, if you're not patient enough to get them, and I'm gonna go ahead and put him in bad, uh, is Totoro or whatever his name is. He's from My Hero. He does a slow and freeze or whatever, but it's a very light one. It's not a terrible snipe, especially if you're going for a mythic or legend, and he happens to be the epic. But if you really don't want to spend too much on an epic, Jotaro's more of like the thing you should go for here, not this unit. But he does provide a CC, so when you are looking at the shop and only staring at mythic or legendary, I would suggest to keep an eye out for those 3 epics, so that you can actually help out your team a lot better than you want. Actually, this guy should be considered a limited because you can't get him anymore. And now I'm gonna go ahead and talk about these. Um, they're they're not the worst. I'll put trash for them. Um, these are all the epics that aren't the ones I already said. So I tried stuff like Inosuke, Crocodile, Zametsu. They were kind of the other characters I was using with JoJo to get through the game. And I put Zametsu in the spot because Zametsu was the line unit. He actually has like a line close to like what Coyote became. He actually has like a decently sized line. Like it's bigger than Goku Blue's. And Inosuke's I believe is a giant circle. And they're good, but once you get the Marineford, most of these epics just fall flat, and at that point you need a legend. So these guys are trash, but if you literally are that unlucky with the spins, most of the epics will just get you through all the way up to Marineford, and then if you aren't saving up for 2.5 gems if you don't have VIP, then you'll be stuck there until somebody carries you or until you stop being a little you know what and just save your gems for the legends that can get you through the game, which I'll talk about later. Um, Actually, you know what? Let me move all these guys down a tier and say bad, but the same things I'm saying about them before. Speak that way. All right, looks a little bit better. All right, do trash, but all right, and then they're bad, but in a good way. Next is Imperfect Cell. I've been waiting to talk about this guy. Now we can actually put stuff in all right. Imperfect Cell is so insane, and the people that are farming Cell, I don't know why they didn't talk about the fact that this guy can solo all the way up to like he actually can probably beat Sand Kingdom by himself. Or not Sand Kingdom, Hidden Sand Village, but he definitely can do Snowy Town. And oh my god, for an epic, he hits as hard as a legendary should. He does so much damage, and he is so dirt cheap. Like, he's so good that I have beaten West City and gotten super perfect cell, and I want to go back and pick up another one of these and the semi perfect, just to make it so. And this goes for you pros out there. Just to make it so that I can just plop him down, wave 1, and kill that first little gaggle of units just to make the game go slightly faster. That's literally his purpose. Now, to just add this while you're grinding for other units and making this guy, he is pretty good on his own to do the quest that you need to do to evolve him. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like he's God's gift to man or anything, but that grind was so free once you got the cells, and the cells were so good. But starting with this one, he and all the other cells are amazing at cracking airborne shields, which have only recently started to spring up with the cell raid where he comes from. So once you get one of these, it should make the cell raid a little easier. And the new dungeon for Utah and whatever the other guy's name, Ghetto or something. And these guys, even if you don't have uh, the strongest one, just plopping one of these guys down at the beginning of the game to shave shields instead of doing other methods to do it is really nice. Especially since most hills are by the front, but I will say, not every map has a hill at the very front, like Namek and all that. So sometimes you do plop him down at the start of games, and he doesn't hit everything. But either way, you're waiting. So if you have an open slot because you have like a strong ass unit already that can carry, most of these units can kind of solo the game themselves. If you already have one of those, you plop this bad boy in after doing a couple raids, and it'll just make your game go that much quicker. Moving on to the legendaries. Now, for right now, Goku is an L for Lucy. Goku is so fucking bad. He is so trash. Avoid him at all costs. I have been waiting, and I've been hearing about a Dragon Ball Z raid for such a long time that I thought for sure that this unit would evolve like Aaron. Unfortunately, we have no evolution. So right now, this guy at like max upgrade, almost like he's 80 in the shot, but I'm pretty sure max upgrade is only 5k with like an 11-second cooldown or 14 seconds or something. It's terrible. It's got a giant AoE, but there are so many other legendaries that you should be hitting that if you get this guy, it's actually a humongous L. You'll start losing at sand with him, and you really legendaries don't become like just other epics do better than he does. And I wanted to save some of these other ones for later, but in order, these two are. I'm just gonna put them side by side and talk about them really quick. Orwin and Bulma are insane. Orwin, even in the most recent update, is a character that almost everybody can use to boost everybody and to make it so that the back never dies. And especially on like a map like Curse, maybe not in Infinite unless you're just using him to boost, kind of like a better Sakura. He kind of like covers the ground that everybody else can't deal with. So for instance, for people that don't know what he does, he shoots a flare every like 10 or so seconds, and a horse comes with a big health shield. He's a summon unit. And that collides with like a lot of enemies that are like it collides with every enemy unless they hadn't spawned yet. And what will happen is a lot of people will stack their units in the front so that you can kill the waves fast, keep the game going, but also to put them in really good positions to hit wider AoEs. And these units, the enemy units, can get past these areas. Well, when you put Orwin next to your units and boost, it can actually make it so that not only are your units still holding it down in the front, but then it gives you a little insurgence of a horse that can hit not only ground but the air. And it just adds up because you can plop down 4 of these guys, and for dirt cheap, starting at 775, which is wave 2 energy right there, but the fact that it's like a thousand to, I think it's 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, and you're already buffing your units, which like greatly increases their attack by an arbitrary number that I don't need to remember right now, and it just piles on. Sometimes it will look like, oh man, there's a 20,000 health mob right around our door. And if you have like a couple of these down that are all doing 1,000 each, they may just wreck it on their own, and it will just slap the bosses that are taking an hour to get around the whole map. So there's never not a good time to pick up this unit. It will get you through most of the game, and even if you're like really good at the game, it's a great option to just come back to and use in case the current units you're using or grinding are just not getting that job done. And as for Bulma, she's just the best farm unit in the game. You need a farm unit. I put Speed Cart kind of more down here because you eventually should just grow out of it and go into Bulma. Because there's never a story that you're using Bulma that your units kind of can't handle at the beginning, to where you need to do this micromanage shit with the speed card. She's just the farm unit. She gives you a lot of money. That's all you really need to know. Unfortunately for Bulma, though, it is wave 2. Next is Giovanno. He's in more of like the camp of doo-doo. He'll do what the other ones do, the epics, and get you all the way to Marineford. No questions asked. So if you're aiming for more of the top tiers and you happen to get him, just like these epics, it's good. But eventually you'll be scrapping them. There's not much more to say other than the fact that he's a pretty decently strong unit that will get you through most of the earlier game. This one's actually a pretty good one. I don't think he's alright, though. Yeah. We'll do bad for Dio. Now, some of you might be thinking, yeah, Dio probably deserved more of an alright near Cell, or even supposed to get, but I did a lot of experimenting with him as a legendary, and 9 times 10 out of 10, I found it not really worth it to use this time stop like Dio or Jotaro to kind of deal with like the later portions, and he's kind of too strong for like the other areas. So it's like, if you happen to get him over JoJo, it will make like the earlier portions of the game a lot easier. But eventually, I'd say by Magic Town, his DPS and like his CC will start to like bleed through the cracks. Like he'll be noticeably weak. However, before those times, he'll seem like a very nice CC unit. But I'd say even by Hollow, things start to get weird. But he does have a rapid... Him and Jotaro have a rapid hit move that are really good for shields. But as soon as you get to that time stop thing for JoJo, he no longer helps with shields. But you can use him to plop him and get one to time freeze, and then you get the rest of them to do the multi-hit. Because with crowd control diminishing returns, for those who don't know, if you hit somebody with the CC, you won't be able to hit them again for another, like, 15 seconds. And I think it's, like, soft to hard CC. Like, you can stack different CCs. So, even though his is a very long cooldown until he CCs again, since you only have the one, you can have the JoJo's add up with that, like, stronger damage for 900. And then time freeze for the CC. But the freeze is hardly ever going to come up in the later portions of the game. Next is Dabo. I'm actually going to put Dabo here. It's kind of high for somebody like this, but this needs to be said. Dabo is a fire unit, everybody. Everybody watching this, he is a fire unit. Okay? For those of you that haven't made it to Magic Town, or are in Magic Town and you don't know what to do, which is the story before the one we're on now, this unit, if you snipe him, will carry you through that part. And since he's a legendary and dirt cheap, it's kind of like, if sniping Cell and him is like a good way to get through that section. Yeah, he's just really strong for doing what he needs to do. And then you can throw him out when you're done with that and bring him back every time you have to do some Magic Town mission. Now, he may not be able to beat, like, the regen ones or whatever, but you can just skip those challenges. But for the most part, it can get you through that stupid story when we had to do an elemental thing, and it makes it so you don't have to spend a bunch of gems getting Natsu or Rengoku or something. Next is Itachi. Itachi is an L for Lucy. Itachi is not a burn unit. I know one of his attacks says burn, but he is not a burn unit. And he hits for one of the weakest damages of all the legendaries. I do not know why they did our man Itachi this bad, but his base damage at max upgrade level 1 is around 200. And the burn tick is like 1s and 2s. And the scaling up all the way up to like 70 something, he only hits for maybe like 400, with the tick damage doing around 3s to 5s. He is so abysmally bad. I thought he'd be a burn unit, but unfortunately he is not. If you got this unit, sucks to be you. He is not anything. He's a hill, but he doesn't. And by the time hill comes around, he doesn't hit hill for anything. So yeah, even the shield ticking doesn't work. He needs to be like reworked or tweaked or fixed or something. Next is pain. I'm actually gonna put pain in this like little department. Pain is like the Diet Coke All Might, and before I ranked him a little higher because he's a legendary that does the CC, but you need to get him to like upgrade 4 for this. And most of the time the push isn't like really great, but he does have pretty high DPS for a legendary. So what will happen is, even though his attack speed's a little on the higher side, he'll push all the enemies back and probably kill a lot of them up until you get to like the harder areas like Hollow and everything. But for the earlier portions of the game, if you just so happen to get this guy, or again if you're like a pro and you need a little bit of CC, he's a nice legendary to just plop on the team to add a little aid. Because I don't think you have to do too many upgrades. It's like a JoJo situation, but he is a legendary, so it's kind of out of the way. I'd say, just like the other epics, kind of avoid them, but if you happen to get it going for a different mythical, slap him on the team. Next is Blackbeard. Blackbeard's extra damage is handy. It's handy. It's just like Pain. It's handy. But the curse damage that he does, especially now that we've seen the potential that other curse characters can do, it's not as great as a lot of people might think it is. Now, I, for one, have used him time and again in like legendary runs to just add that little bit of extra spunk for like 850. But since it's like this weird line attack that can miss, what usually happens is like the tick that you're adding on with him could have probably been better used for something like an epic crowd control, or just a boost from this kind of units, or another unit that could have just did extra damage than adding on to like the one beef unit that you got to ensure your victory. Because I don't even know, from judging from it, and I can even do another legendary run, how much he even actually added. Because some cases I was using him to try to like add a curse to make my fire damage do more, but it didn't seem like it was doing more. So it may not even have good effects on units, like special units, like the fire ones, because of the shields, or any unit with a shield for that matter. And it's a really high attack speed, but he does have decent damage. And then units that the ice units, I'm not sure if it worked properly on them. Like, I don't know if they need to debug it. And it doesn't hit air. So, unlike JoJo, who can actually time freeze the air, or JoJo and Dio, who can actually freeze the air, Pain can't push them back, and Black Air can't curse. So, what usually happens is it's kind of helping out maybe with like a boss or something. But it doesn't come up too often. I'm gonna probably put these guys here. They're not terrible by any means, like any of these three, but their damage is so insignificant that I don't really know too many players that have actually used them. I have seen them. They do exist, but 9 times out of 10, if you see somebody rocking this, they just so happen to pull it, and they're just kind of adding on. Their damage isn't particularly great. I don't have Goku Black for this very reason as well on this list, but it's essentially the same 3 caveats where all of them do essentially around the same damage. Now, I will give Zeke props here. If you're doing raids, it's not too bad for the damage that he does, but he is more or less a fodder unit that doesn't do anything. I've done the showcase and everything with him. But if you're pouring levels into this unit, who's supposed to be fed into something else, it's just an overall L. Because if you were able to get him by either crafting or just getting the lucky drop, you're aiming towards those raids, and he's eventually going to be fodder. So you shouldn't even be using him for DPS. He is a hill. Kizaru's a hill, and I'm almost positive Mihawk is, but they're all terrible, and so is Goku Black, but they're all really bad. Moving on to Ghoul. This legendary is so unbelievably weak that I think she honestly gives Itachi a run for his money. When that update released and I saw how pitiful her damage was, I thought maybe with some levels it would change, but no, she's just really that bad. So if you see her, Toki, in shop, avoid that shop if you can. Now I get everybody has tight schedules, but some of these units, if you happen to see them as like the legendary or epic, I would just wait. Alright, next is Nora. I've actually seen a couple people get away with this character in story and stuff. Decent damage for a legendary. Like, I don't see him come up in shop anymore. But he actually does alright stuff getting through the earlier sections of the game. I've seen people even flex him a little bit with the stuff that he can kind of do up until Marineford. But I'd say this JoJo character is probably better. Uh, what is his name? Kaneki though. Kaneki is actually like a legendary that if you snipe, he can do a lot of work. I'm actually more. I'll put him at the bottom of this because he doesn't really add any like CCs or anything. But it needs to be noted that this legendary has a very high base attack speed coming out the gate. So he can also do the shield crushing for you, but you're probably better off with JoJo and his CC. It's really nice damage. I've even seen people slap traits on him and keep up with some of the other ghoul characters. It's pretty nice, but ghoul characters have been power crept for a while now, so to say that with enough traits and practice you can get them up there is like, well, they're not that good anymore anyway. Moving on to Bleach. This is when things are going to start to spike up here. Rukia is another good. I'm actually going to have her here instead. Is another good legendary to snipe. She can freeze single target when she comes out, like on placement for 900, which sucks at first, but eventually becomes a full AoE with okay damage. And you might be thinking, well, that sounds better than Dio, but the problem is placing her and doing an individually freeze is like so bad at first that you're like, it was alright, but you're really like lying to yourself. And then when she eventually gets to the point where she can freeze everything, it's kind of like not significant anymore because it costs so damn much. But it is good damage. But I wouldn't go out of your way for this one anymore. It was decent in like the Hollow era, but now that we're in a Hollow and even a little bit in Magic Town, but now that we're in Curse, the freeze is just not great. You can place it around the corner, but you're not really doing yourself any favors. Grimjaw's next. Grimjaw at one point in time had decent enough damage for me to scale this guy as like one of the greater legendaries to pick up. But I've looked at the numbers during the run and the Fairy Tale legendaries just came out swinging a little bit harder than him, and his awkward hitboxes that hit for a lot are just no longer like tolerable for someone like me. That he was put on the team by Sand, and he'll get you past Marineford, but you're better off getting the other ones. He has good damage though, so if you do happen to snipe him, I would put him on the team for the damage. But with the high cooldowns and everything, it can be awkward at times. Moving on to Gon, I always have to put Gon in this like weird spot. I'll put him under Sakura. Now the thing about Gon, everybody, is Gon's damage is actually like weaker than some of the other legendaries, but the thing with him is you can kind of chip away at the mythical every time he comes in shop, which is getting rare by like the second, so it makes me want to actually put him in trash. He's trash, but I want to say that like in theory he can be really good. So it actually would cost more to get this unit off of the ground compared to the one you're prepping for, like if you just rip the band-aid off. But the thing about him is if you happen to snipe 10, no cooked fish included either, you can evolve him into the mythic. And the mythic in base especially, but more or less when you evolve him, hits like a bus. And the idea of being too greedy seems to be like a commonality with all the noobs. And if you're just like, I can only grind for a couple hundred or whatever, and you keep hitting the shop, you might want to wait till that guy's in shop so that every time that you go for it, you at least pick him up and eventually hit the 10 to cheese your way a mythic. Moving on to Hisoka. Hisoka is another CC unit. I'm actually gonna put him at the lower end of bed. Um, the issues with Hisoka is he doesn't get his CC till 4th upgrade, just like Jotaro. But Jotaro has like really good attack speed and decent damage, where Hisoka's damage is like decent. Or not even decent, like a lot on the lower end. And then eventually he creeps up to this like bungee thing where he doubles slows, which is really nice. But it falls flat by Magic Kingdom. So he'll help you through Ant Kingdom and all that, but for the most part, he's kind of like a novelty at this point. Moves on to Gale Jaw. Gale Jaw actually does really good damage. I'm actually just gonna put him above Rukia. He does do really good damage. My problem with this character though is he for the most part there's just a better fairy tale unit, so it just makes me really want to shuffle a lot of these characters down a whole tier. But to give you an idea of what it kind of looks like with the legendaries and everything, this is kind of like where they're scaled and when you bump into them and everything. Like, honestly, even right here, I could just stop here and be like, this is the legendary tier list once we get through everybody, and then actually scale the mythics. So, moving on to the next one, Juvie is cracked. She's very cracked. Actually, I wouldn't even mind saying supposed to get. Yeah. No. We'll do a top of alright. Because by the time you get to Magic Town, it does get a little scuffed. Juvie is insane. Juvie solo is like a lot of levels in this game. I haven't tried her in Cursed Kingdom or Cursed Academy yet, but she was my anchor on DPS as a legendary during that run, and holy cow, she almost hits for 10,000. With Orwin buffs or any Sakura cheese, you can get her to 10,000 every like 5 seconds. Like, she actually hits like a bus on final upgrade, and you can get all 4 upgraded. The problem is, once you get to Magic Town, she's not a fire unit, so you kind of only can get like 1 max, and then you have to focus on kind of like Dobby and anti-air, and it gets a little clunky by Magic Town to even like spec her past that. But if you snipe her or Orwin, even Cell for that matter, you're gonna have a good time with like grinding this game. Like, you shouldn't be asking anybody for help if you snipe any of these units, because they will literally carry you through the whole thing. Next is Frieza. This is technically limited, but I feel like enough people were here to see it. Frieza's trash. I might even put her in Nezuko. Yeah. The problem with Frieza is it was like a limited time, and I don't know. I leveled him up all the way up to 60, and he was still only hitting for like 50. It's terrible for a legendary. Like, that even is close to Itachi, and you had to be playing during a raid and enter a code and everything. I kind of expected him with. I know it's 525, but I just kind of expected them to at least hit harder than Cell with the 25 extra coin, but no, he doesn't. His supernovas and everything are just really weak. Next is Chunks. Sorry everybody, I gotta put Chunks down here. He has really good damage, but the fact that you have to wait for an RNG drop in a raid that's like incredibly hard, by the time you get this unit, the areas you're struggling with, especially for 1350, he's a waste of money to plop down. For somebody like Cell, who's another drop only, you can use him for leash stuff, where this guy is like, I'm taking over for DPS, but he doesn't do any DPS. Like, even Juvie and Galjaw hit harder. And you can just spin for these. This guy, you have to beat cell raids until hopefully he comes out. Which also gives you, like, this false sense of, I should grab him so that I can get the mythic, which I'll go into a little bit later. Next is Semi-Perfect Cell. Oh man, I'm tempted to put him all the way up, but I'm not going to do that disservice. I know you see Godspeed there and everything, but holy cow, this unit's so insane. So it doesn't get to do the level 1 placement like imperfect, which honestly makes me want to put them side by side. But you can scale this guy up to the energy blast things, and at 75, which is where I kind of had him before I evolved him and everything, he was hitting for around like 6,000 multi-hit. And the other thing, so that makes me think he's probably closer to the 8,000s, 9,000, or even 10,000 in outscales Juvie. And the thing is on placement, he still does what Imperfect does, which is just really handy. He's like overall a handy unit that all you have to do is like, it's a little tedious to do the raid stuff, but by the time you get it, the things that you can kind of like add to your team with flight shields and like just that early strong presence placement for flight and ground, it's just over it. The devs screwed up with both their scaling. I kind of wanted to go more into it with Super Perfect Cell, but they do double damage than the inscription states. So for instance, I'm gonna say Super Perfect Cells. Mine says that it hits for 1,600, but what it actually hits for is around 3,300, and it's a multi-hit. So if they have a shield, or if the first part of the attack kills, it will continue on, and it doesn't reset the timer on the attack. Like, it still clocks in, and that doesn't change the fact that all of these units right here, these three especially, have really good attack speed. So they're 9 times out of 10 killing everything until you get to, like, the boss. Then they're insignificant. But Juvie takes it out, and then Cell may not take it out. But since he wrecked the mobs, he fulfilled what he needed to do. And we're not talking about earlier sections. We're talking all the way up to Magic Town at the very least. Next is Togi. I really wanted to say that this unit was like really good, but I'd say take it or leave it with JoJo, whichever one you prefer. I think Dio is honestly the better legendary because of his multi-hit on placement and lower. Like, he does have a better cost, but he's a single hit, and it's like a range stun with like a slightly better CC, where his is a time stop that's like, he's just adding more damage. Like, you could go either way, whichever one you like, I'd say, with this one. But I will say Dio can help with shields, where this guy can kind of help more with range and actual DPS. But by the time that DPS actually matters, where JoJo kind of struggled, his isn't even anything anyway. I think he gets close to like 1,100. Or not 1,100, 11k. So actually getting close to Juvie, but since it's like a single hit, it's not amazing. Nabara sucks. I got her 92. I don't know what to say. She's an air. I guess I'll put her here because she's like an air bleed unit, but she only hits for like around $1,000. It's not great. Or maybe like $2 or $3,000. I've seen even people like gas her up with YouTube videos or whatever, and even with Superior and the setup, she hits like an actual wasp. Hold on, Josh. We're not at the mythics yet. Well, we're almost about to be, but she's a wasp. Have her on your if you happen to not get any anti-bleed or anything like that. Sniper. But the problem is, bleed doesn't really become a problem until, like, You could say Tokyo Ghoul, but it's really not that bad unless you're doing like infinites. So it's really like the only time it comes up is the newest raid with the stingrays, and I mean she's keeping the bleed on the unit, but it's kind of like you sniped her just to fulfill like a dungeon thing. And if you're going into dungeons with the antip, antip, I can't even say it, the anticipation to help with anti heal with this legendary unit, you probably should have just brought something that could really do something, uh, like with the other units, like any form of other CC to make it so that the stingray we never have to worry about the stingray's healing instead of worrying about making it stop healing. Because even if you plop other stronger anti-heal units like Juzo or Pito, even their damage is insignificant and their anti-heal isn't like too strong to stop like the massive healing that thing does. And it's again like a whole 2,500 gems just for like one fight, where you may come up close in MVP in one circumstance, but most of the time it'll be like, and then you threw your anti-heal out, and no one cared, including you. Alright, finally we're on the main dish. We don't have to separate this in two parts, but this is going to look really weird. All Might get a buff. He's one of the first units to add in this game, and he got a buff, and he hits for 50,000 at level 100 max upgrade. That is a lot of damage, and he has a CC. So I don't know what everybody thinks about that. He probably is really handy. I've already heard that before his buff, he was handy in leaderboards. I'd say for a ground unit, he's a decent grab, but I do want to emphasize the staggering amount of gems you have to put into a mythic, and there's just better mythics out there. I have one now, and I am reluctant to train it because the units right now are so incredibly strong that I do not care about the CC. In fact, if you're picking this up as your first and only mythic, or you already have mythics and you're looking for a new CC unit that can actually do damage, like you're either in a situation where a better unit is available for this, or you're in a situation where there's stronger units. So for me, even though All Might got this fat buff, I still don't think he's worth it. I'll put him at the top of it, but I still think investing that many gems into a unit like that, it's really not there. Plus, you have to do 3 canisters of this fuel to even evolve him, which I don't think you need to do anything with like food or anything. But it's kind of like you're starting out the game. By the time you have enough to do this mythic pity, you've already passed probably enough courses where you could evolve a different mythic and get even better results. And in some cases, the mythic's default hits hard enough that with grinding, they're already like doing what All Might would do at his max potential on evolved. So even though, just keep an eye out. Keep an eye out if you have an open slot, but do not get him right away. Now, for this character, he's trash, Madara. However, if you happen to get him, he is a fire unit. Now, I'm pretty sure, I just recently got him. I'm pretty sure that fire doesn't come until a little bit later. But, if you do happen to get him, bring him to Magic Town. Other than that, he has fallen out of favor. His damage isn't what it was. And I think even with the buff and everything, it doesn't matter. I believe you do gotta evolve him for the burn. But I think evolving him only takes place in Sand Village, which is before Magic Town. So it shouldn't be too bad, because if you're struggling with gems and all that other stuff, you're getting this, you're evolving these units before those problems even come up. And his damage in base is still pretty good. For a mythic, it's poor, but compared to the legendaries, decent. And then he fills a leash that you can do to get past a certain section of the map. And a lot of people have problems with this section, but me personally, I suggest Dobby. But if you happen to have Madara, understand that he can beat that level for you as your fire unit. I heard this guy got an amazing upgrade, and I really don't get his support thing, but I have yet to see somebody use him. Like, I want to say L for Lucy, but I'm sure there's some diehard fan that's using this guy's support stats. I just can't for life for me use him, and he doesn't evolve. Like, I don't know why he's still in this game as like an unevolved mythic, but I have one, and I haven't touched him, and I've had him since like Attack on Titan raids. Like, and I got him, I was like, cool, and then I never used him. I might do some experimentation. Don't be surprised if Update 7 I move him up or down. But for right now, he's a unit that if you see him in shop, I've heard he's support. Alright, and I have him, and I've heard things about him. And I just have him for the life of me, giving him the time that he deserves. Next up is Armin. This one is another waste. However, I will say, plopping down an Armin for like 12k or 15k or whatever it is for just 5 grand is a really good way to aid your team in dungeons and in raids. Like, he's a very good unit for being like, they do not have enough for that huge upgrade. Let me just plop down an Armin in my empty slot that I wasn't using anyway, because he's just overall like a good unit for something like that. Because every unit in this game, when you place them down, they attack. So you have to wait until you've upgraded them to the next skill attack, or you have to wait until their attack animation is done so that they can do the right attack. For him, it's a whole minute wait, but if you're using him for the leash that I'm referring to, what will happen is they're right by the door, right? They're right by the door, or things are getting out of hand, and you can just plop him down for 5,000, because sometimes that's what awkward number you're on while you're upgrading your Bulma. This is mainly for the pros. Noobs, avoid him at all costs. For the pros, you can plop this unit down if you have him already, or if you haven't spun for everything yet. You can plop this guy down and just go nuke everything so we just don't lose right now. And then, because it takes so long for enemies to go from the beginning of the map to the end of the map, his cooldown should be back and things get crazy again. So what will happen, and you don't have to evolve him or anything. Out the gate, you can do this. What will happen is, let's say you're farming in one of these things, and you don't have the best money right now, and there's like a baby or an android that's getting by. I'm talking about Armin. This is a very least situation, but I need to talk about it. People just say trash, and I need to tell you guys what you can actually do with these units if you go for them or if you have them already. Well, what you can do is use Armin as a game saver. As much as people say this unit is trash, I tend to bring him to scuffed raids as a security blanket, unironically, to plop him down, nuke, and then be like, okay, I can go back to what I'm doing, which is farming for the unit that's actually going to carry the raid. That way I don't have to overinvest in the back to save a game. Now, this dungeon, I didn't end up doing it, but that was because of a couple reasons. I was trying to have units that would aid us in specific scenarios I was finding myself falling for a lot, and then I ended up not using them. Stuff like Gray for freezing, or Pito for anti-heal, which only came up like a few times, where I lost so many dungeons because nobody would place, that if I had brought the security blanket, I probably could have carried a lot more dungeons or even raids in the past. But I'm so spiteful that I just don't do it. But anyway, that's what you guys can do if you pick him up or if you have him in your inventory. His buff was really nice. Speaking of buffs, we can talk about these guys. I actually think these guys are doo-doo. Sorry, Whitebeard and Broly fans. I think even with the buffs, these guys are still not worth it. No, I will say you can get Broly really early, and Whitebeard, unfortunately, you have to wait for Marineford. But Whitebeard's placement damage is really strong, and Broly's like max AoE thing is the whole map. But I really think like pouring all your resources into these guys is such a fucking waste. Like it's such a waste to get these units, even with the buffs, because it's kind of like Whitebeard's like situation is the only people that chalk him up either have had him already and already evolved him, or they're leaderboard kids that have like all this CC and stuff to condense everything to make like a 300th wave leaderboard. And most of you are just trying to beat the game or win a dungeon or something. And if you're wasting your gems and your DPS trying to make this guy pop off in a game, you're kind of trolling because most games don't last, or all the games last only 15 to 20 rounds. And you can just pour more money in other units that will just do a lot more for you. Where these guys, they don't do anything. I think he has a knockback, and again, it's the AoE, but I still haven't gotten Broly because of how weak he is. And I actually don't even have Whitebeard either. Good luck, Josh. Next, this is actually another CC unit, but you don't get it until Marineford. Shanks. Now, I'm putting him in doo-doo because he does stun, and he stuns frequently, and it's a giant AoE. But his damage is laughable. It used to be a unit that was meta as hell, but he has not received a buff or anything. And he was so strong during the Marineford days that even in the Tokyo Ghoul days, which was Marineford was update 1 and Tokyo Ghoul being update 2, he was still kind of keeping up with characters like Juzo. However, by the time we got the Hollow, this guy's damage fell off completely, and it became like an overpriced CC. Because you do have to spend a lot of money for his crowd control to actually come up. And because you have to get all the way to Marineford anyway to even get this guy to evolve, it's pretty rough, to say the least. So I would just say he's like All Might, where he's just kind of doo-doo. That's like a free unit though. No, Blinky better. We don't know more about him, but I'll have it there. Next is a Kainu. Guys, I don't know why people think Akainu's dead, because there's no more fire stuff. Akainu is still like Madara, where by the time you get to Magic Town, you need a fire unit. And Akainu covers the leash of Hill as well, so he actually goes far. Especially if you can get him evolved by Marineford. My issues are a lot of people don't even really know how to spec him. You're supposed to spec him till 5.6 attack range, like attack speed, and put off the 14 specs. Now, for the people that don't know what I'm talking about, Akainu has an attack chain where he does these kind of like Magma Fists that are low cooldown. They're low cooldown, and what they do is like a lot of damage. However, when he gets to his upgrades where his damage and AoE starts to really spike, his lower damage moves, if you like look at the timers and everything, actually do more. So the only time you should really be speccing his last 3 upgrades is when you have enough money to just put it at the max, because it actually puts the timer down a little bit less. So it'll be like 5.6 to like 14, but then if you go all the way down to the final max upgrade, it will go down to like, I don't want to say 11 or 12, but it goes down with attack speed. And with the right traits, he's actually still like a pretty banger of a unit. But the fact that a lot of people have to get around that learning curve of how his DPS works and how gutted he's really gotten by Curse, because he can do okay in Ant Kingdom, and he's really your answer in Magic Town. But by the time Curse comes around, he's really hitting them like a wet noodle, which goes just Madara as well. Naruto's next. Now, guys, a lot of people give Naruto a lot of slack, but I gotta say about Naruto, he is doo-doo, but he is a free unit. Most people can solo the Naruto raid at this point with how crazy their units are. So if you're a noob and you see Hidden Sand Village, you should be grinning ear to ear. Because if you see somebody attempting to solo that raid, you can jump into the pod, get 200 gems, and grind that. Getting a butt ton of gems for the unit that you actually want, and getting a free unit, which is Naruto. So it actually is pretty good to go for this unit. Now, if you don't care about doing that kind of crap, this unit is so off for anybody trying to go for it. I believe he got a buff, so he's even in the same tier as All Might on this. But I will say, he's not as bad as people give him credit for. They make fun of his piss-ass line for an attack and his low DPS for the work. But if you're, especially if you're a noob, if you happen to get your hands on this because somebody's just grinding gems, or even if you're able to tackle it, getting one of the later units in this and being able to solo it yourself, because these raids are scaled to Marineford. We're in Cursed Academy now. These raids are so easy that I bet you can even solo it with legendaries only. So, picture that. You're playing with legendaries only because you're budgeting gaming right now. And you see Sand Village and you're able to solo it, which I'm going to attempt for you guys one of these days. I need to get Cell first. But, imagine you can solo these and you're just slapping on another good DPS unit. And I don't mean good in the sense as his damage is actually great. It's just, it is a whole nother unit that could hit harder than some of these commons, like Krillins and stuff. But he's a whole tier down because it is a lot of work. Next on the chopping block, this is an L for Lucy. I'm putting Aaron all the way at the bottom, guys. Aaron is a joke unit. Whoever greenlit this thing needs to have their brain looked at. The only time I've ever seen this unit ever used is when we were playing what is it called? He's basically a collector unit. The only time this guy ever saw play was when we were playing the Muzen Train raids. And what people would do is, instead of helping out with the raid, to make the final Muzen guy and Akaza die, they would farm the whole game only to activate the Aaron and end the boss. And some of you might be thinking, isn't that like what you were talking about with Armin? Like, he ends the game, he fixes the issue. The problem is, if you invested the amount of money, which you can see it there, 100,000 yen, into just regular units, especially nowadays, you could have just killed him at the door instead of waiting for Aaron and the Titans to crawl over to him halfway through the map. And it doesn't help that you need 4 legendaries to do this and be strong enough to even do the Attack on Titans raids. So it's such an L doing this. Even at the time, it was such a novelty unit where you were just kind of flexing that you have it. But other than that, it's a trash unit. Was fun to do the first time though. Anyway though, next is Ito. Ito is a waste, and I'm actually just gonna go ahead and put Tarcha right. You know what? Actually, I'll put Tarcha next to these guys, and we'll go one by one. Ito's a waste, even from the get go in Ghoul, and I believe she's already received a buff that didn't do anything. All she really was the Namek Saga leaderboard unit at the time. But now that we got stuff like Ken, like, if you're a noob, you're not doing leaderboard, alright? And for the people that are already really good at this game, even if you're considering leaderboard, she's already been power crept, so you don't even need it. There's so many other units that you can use instead. So she lost her leash, and then you have to do this like arbitrary thing where she specifically has to get the kills on stuff. But even in the Ghoul Saga, she wasn't really doing anything. But a lot of people try to compare her to Juzo and Avery even back then, even though Juzo added like shield breaking blade and Avery had numbers that we hadn't seen yet that she could do, but it was more of like an imaginary fantasy of her getting away with this DPS. And as for Tarta, he does eventually get to a full circle AoE burn damage, but that's a double burn damage actually. But that's the thing. He's another situation where, of the three, you really should just go for Akainu because you can get him by Marineford, but Madara is the earliest, but it's 2 eyes. So it's really pick your poison on this, but I will say that Akainu is at least a hill, so you can beat the levels before that with a hollow and everything because he can help in that regard. Where the Tarcho will just like overkill the ice mages, and since you can do it with Dobby, none of these guys even really matter outside of Akainu. But even then, there are other options for Hill. Next is Juzo. Juzo's always been a weird one for me to rank. Now, I ranked Armin. I've ranked him even S tier before, but I ranked Armin for this leash, and I gotta say, um, Juzo's the first mythic I'm gonna put here ish. I actually would love to put him higher, but he's a situation where no matter where you are in the game, he's just really handy. Like, his damage is really falling off, but the thing is by the time his damage has fallen off, he's carried you through most of the game if you get him early, and then by the late game, if you don't even need to evolve him, you can keep him the way he is. He crunches shields with his 7-hit combo that lingers bleed until his next attack, and this AOE is one of the most satisfying hitboxes in the game. So what will happen is he'll just sleep on the enemies and keep this anti-heal on them forever. And then, if you don't have a shield breaker, which a lot of people shouldn't, he will shred shields even better than Dio. Now, if you plop down like 3 Dios, sure. But if you plop down 2 Juzos, that's 14 shields. So that can even knock down the Armor Titan. That can even knock down the guy, the armored unit in the ghoul area, where you would get him. So if you beat the first boss and level him up. Oh, nice, Josh. Very nice. He'll just do so much work for you. And then even when you're outside of his current campaign, when you're doing challenges that involve shield, where they only have one each, he'll run at them, shave the shields off of everybody that's going into this buzzsaw, and then he'll be hitting for his normal damage, and then if they happen to have regen, that's gone too. And then when he gets to the later cone, his damage is so quick and spikes. It's actually closer to Shanks, that this bleed is basically never not happening, and it does so much damage. I happen to get Nimble 3 on mine though, so I'm not gonna put him higher. But he is definitely a unit that if you're struggling with anti-heal or shields, or if you're like already a pro, and you just want another quality of life unit like Cell or something, he's not a bad mythic, and you should bust him out even if people give you a hard time about it. Avery is a fallen completely out of meta. Oh no. Anyway though, Avery is completely fallen out of meta. I have people still clinging on to him, and they like his damage and his spikes, and even some people are like that with Jelly. But the problem with this unit is his placement damage is so weak, and the money cliff that you have to get around for him to actually start doing his cone damage, which isn't even a multi-hit, can be really clunky on getting through areas. Welcome back. The problem with it for me, and I'm actually going to put these guys a little bit higher to make this look a little cleaner. The big problem for me with these, hold on, Ahsoka's like worse. He's probably the best. I like that. Better. The problem mainly for me on it is what was I even talking about? Oh, Avery. The problem really for me is he's kind of like fragging in Ghoul if you evolve him and do all that stuff, but then by Hollow it's like awkward. And then by Ant Kingdom, them shields are not doing this character any favors. even if he can kind of keep up with the DPS. And it just turns into this situation where you're kind of contemplating where you should be putting your money in your units, even though he does do a big chunk of damage. Like, he isn't the worst to snipe, but you're better avoiding him. And since he really doesn't even show up in shop too much anymore, you might not even ever see him. But if you do and you think it's like this brand new unit, it's not. It's an older unit, and you can make him work, but it's like a mastery issue. And then even then, the payoff is like mediocre. Next is Akaza. Akaza's a free unit. People seem to forget that about this unit, and he actually hits like a bus. So the thing is, it's just like he's like the Naruto unit that I said doo doo, but he's free. Let me start moving people down to make this even out. They are kind of a waste. And down here. Alright. But this unit is it's not a bad he's not banned yet, but he's going to be. I'll talk about it later. I'm in the middle of something. It's kind of like this situation where if you're good enough to beat Muzen Train, he's actually an upgrade from it. So it's kind of like if it was hard, then he's gonna make your team better. But if it was easy, he shouldn't be helping your team any. But he's this nice little like plop it down wave 2 kind of unit that like clears the early game for you. Excuse me. So it's kind of like a situation where it's not even a bad grab, even on initial placement, and it gives you something to do with raids. It's still garbage, but I'm not gonna sit here and act like that. But a lot of people miss the Muzen Train on this one, no pun intended, because Hollow released so close to it, and a lot of people missed out on a multi-hit unit. And if you get a good trade on him too, like unique or anything, he can actually do some heavy duty carrying because he does have a self buff. It is a multi hit. It does go the mileage. The only issue I have is you have to wait for Muzen Train and you have to grind it, and all that payoff is kind of like you may get something better by the time you get this unit. But if you don't, it was a nice snipe for essentially free, and it gave you enough to do. Next is Rengoku. Rengoku's in the same state as the rest of the fire units, and I'm actually going to rank him lower, even though usually I rank them higher. And it's because it's really hard to see Rengoku in shop anymore. I never see him. Fire's becoming a little bit of a less thing now, especially since I discovered the Dabi thing. This is Ronoho telling me the fire thing, but since I did the process of beating it with him as the legendary, now that we know as a group, as a community, that this fire unit gets it done, wasting your gems on these other fire units, it's just not really worth it. You can do it, because Dabi has a hard time coming in shop, but to do all them raids and waiting for Rengoku in shop, I would put him lower, but the damage is pretty good. Next is Aizen. Aizen is an actual L. I'm going to put him next under these guys because evolving him is actually pain. Aizen was released in the Hollow area, which his scaling is equivalent, and I don't want to beat a dead horse with these same arguments on it, but especially with more time, you'll never use his ability. And his scaling is so abysmally weak that he just don't even think about him. You'd be better off with the other ones in L. Next is Unicro or whatever. This guy's in the same boat as like some of these other guys where his DPS is actually getting better. I think he also got a buff, but it's like a situation where you could try to make these characters work, and he does have the potential to spike up even closer to Coyote Stark. But why attempt these like missions when you can just get a different unit? He's pretty cool. He won't disappoint, just like Avra or whatever. But you'll never see him in shop, and when you will, you'll probably be like, "Who's that?" And then this is basically what you'll get out of it, like maybe the Magic Town. Next is Coyote. I cannot stress enough how strong this unit still is. We knew back in Hollow that this unit was pretty strong. I need to put him here. We knew all the way back then that he was pretty overtuned for the area. But we did not expect this unit to still be crazy. Now, I'm not putting him even higher because most of the supposed to gets, I'm not going to be taxing on any traits. And the people that kind of pop off with this unit, uh, they kind of usually have unique. And I don't really like having unique as like a caveat for getting a unit or not. His base damage will get you as high as like Ant Kingdom, with some struggles in with Magic Town. You'll need the fire unit there, so that could be said about everybody. But then his damage will keep going in the new curse map, where he kind of has like the perfect rectangle spot to set up and do his thing. But I want to say more recently he's kind of gotten like outclassed, but he's a pretty good budget unit to snipe. Yeah, speaking of Uru, since he's in shop right now, Uru is in also a kind of like a weirder spot like Juzo, where he's an amazing hill. But Ant Kingdom is murderous, and even in Magic Town, the enemies are just getting too girthy for like the crit stuff that he's trying to pull off. Now, if you snipe this unit, he is a really great hill, but you have to be very mindful on where you're putting this guy, because he used to be able to solo levels, and now he's kind of like the arbitrary, I'll take care of the hills. Now he's turned into, from a unit that's crazy enough to be like the best in the game, to I'll take care of one specific position, which really brings him down for me. Now, if you pick him up, though, you won't have to worry about hill again, but you'll still have to cover the grounds of fire and your ground damage to get through the game. But as long as you can make it, if you have Erwin, you can, to Hollow, you grind this unit up, and you don't have to worry about hills anymore, which is really nice. But you really should be saving for a different unit that I'm going to be talking about later. Next is Gone. Gone's in a similar situation as Coyote, but for me, Gone's in this weird spot where I have to have him here, because if you can pull off the legendary thing, or even if you snipe him early, he's more like the bad for me. But because you can do the legendary thing, I also think that it's kind of alright to snipe this guy as your power unit. I don't really like that you have to kind of be Ant Kingdom to make him work, because he doesn't do great in his own area. But if you do get this off, he can be one of your stronger power units that takes care of air and everything. But you're really shooting your team in the foot if you're going out of your way to get this unit. Like, understanding his power is very difficult. Now, placement damage and everything is really handy, even if you can get good traits on him. But I'd be doing every other unit a disservice by saying, because this guy can full AoE hit everything, including land and air, he's a must grab by Ant Kingdom. It's kind of like, no, if you happen to get the Gons, or if you do pick up this unit, he'll be a great ground power unit, but his attack speed is so awkward. It's so awkward. It eventually just turned into you placing like 3 of them at once so that you can take out something instead of just placing one and upgrading. And he always needs help. Which, you could say that for a couple other units, but there are some units in this game that you don't need help. And I'd rather not gas up Gone just because everybody's been using them since Ant Kingdom. Same with Coyote, a unit that people have been using since Hollow. They have their issues and weaknesses. And some of the best units in this game don't have those. Speaking of units with weaknesses, I'm just going to go ahead and put him way down here. I'm putting the mythics ahead of everybody else so that people understand their power and everything. Yeah, I'll even put some Metsu and everybody like down here. She actually hits harder than these guys. Riki is better because CC. And then these guys do more stuff. Yeah, honestly, Gon is bad. And then I'll put him here. She has a CC. And he is free. So I'll do that. Where is it? Killua. Okay. Killua's problem is this cost is awkward as shit. 1,600 to place is so incredibly awkward. I don't even think you get that wave 3. I think that's a wave 4. If you do nothing. But maybe I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure it's a wave 4. And what you get for it after evolving, which he cannot evolve himself, he's one of those units. It's a unit that can, at max upgrade, go down to 3.3 seconds for a half-second stun and only hit for around, like, 22. Good luck, Josh. 22k is, like, kind of laughable even by Ant Kingdom. And the idea that he's some, like, CC unit when he really is just, like... By the time Killua comes back from his laggy attack of 3 seconds, the unit's already still kind of moving. And then by the next 3 seconds, he already hit his CC, so he can't CC them again. So it's kind of like, do you want a unit that attacks often, that slightly stops the enemy for a second? Or would you rather just have a unit just kill the enemy? Like, it just kind of seems like some hopscotch stuff around what you could just do with other units, especially from the same era. Like, he's a terrible unit to invest into as a support because his support isn't strong enough. And he's a terrible unit to invest in power because he isn't strong enough. So he's a big pass for me because he doesn't even do anything with, like, fire or anything. He's just kind of like a jack of all trades but master of none. And next, I did not want to talk about this guy too early, but I kind of have to say it. I wanted to put this guy lower, but King is an S tier for me. I cannot express enough times that I have recommended this character to people that are struggling with this game. I cannot stress enough. I want to get over the fact that this unit, it should be power corrupt by now. But there's something about plopping down in a hybrid unit that hits for almost, I think without superior, it's like 18. But mine is 22. But let's just say it's 18. That's still incredibly powerful. 1800. And it hits ground and air. And it's a very fast attack speed. And for basically nothing, I'd say one Boma wave, you nearly hit Rage Blast, and by the mid part of the next wave, you hit Rage Blast, which is like a huge size, huge AoE, and the damage is already 15k by upgrade 3, land in air. And so it's like this unit that costs nothing, and he just wrecks everything. Like Ant Kingdom, he can solo it. Magic Town, he can't solo it, but with, like, you could do it with the legendaries, but, like, you grab the Dabi with the King, you beat that, and then you can have King beat the cursed area for you. He can be your power for both land and ground. Yeah, so for me, it's kind of like, I do want to let King go, but the only reason why I'm not using him, I still would be, is because there's a unit in the game that I grinded for that does what he does, but better. So, unfortunately, it's still a huge recommendation for me because you only have to do a shop in Ant Kingdom, which you can get there by legendaries. So, essentially, you can just get to Ant Kingdom with legendaries, pick this guy up, and you're set to curse. If I beat curse with legendaries, it will kind of change. But for quality of life, he's just the go-to heal and DPS unit that you want to go for, and that's what I was referring to with Uru. Is he's kind of like the pinnacle of this now, and he was in Ant Kingdom, but now we've gone through 2 updates, and he's still like a really great unit to just plop down and do stuff for you. He can get out DPS by like some of these uniques and everything, but even in dungeons for Jelly, he was the one I was going to with DPS. Next is Chairman. Chairman is laughably bad for the area that he was released in again, and you got to jump through even more hoops to evolve him. I don't know where people are going off with saying this unit is actually worth it or really good, or they're like tempted to get him or whatever, but it's kind of like uh nah. Getting 40 cooked fish to basically hit like a weaker gone but not hit air in this weird strange cone is like, dude, just get the other units. And then for the DPS that he kind of does as an evolved unit, you can actually get that from a couple unevolved units that we'll go into later. Next is Pito. I still think Pito, like Gone, has like this like interesting leash. I'll put it above, like, a little bit better than Juzo, even though I think Juzo's quality of life is a little bit better. Pito's in, like, this situation where, the damage starting out is actually rough, but by scaling her up, or it up, whatever we want to do with that, you can even handle some of the stuff like Stingrays or any, like, levels, regen, which you don't necessarily even need this stuff, which is why I put characters like Nabora lower and even Juzo, because healing isn't like a problem in this game yet. But when healing does come up, this character does kind of carry it with not only DPS, but damage as well. I don't think, just like Gone and all of them, I don't think it's really worth it to go for any of these characters. Like, if anything, it's more of like a trash, but they're kind of like on the higher spot because they actually do something for you. Like if you snipe any of these characters in this tier, they're bad, but in this good way. Where if you snipe them, it may just make your game easy enough that you're done. Where the characters at the top will just win you the game. Speaking of that, this character still does like a lot of damage. Natsu is better than most, if not all. Not really speed cart, but Natsu's better than like all these units, and it's not just because you need fire like Dabi, because Dabi is higher ranked than him, and I'm actually gonna have a couple characters ahead of Natsu. I already know that, but the thing with Natsu is unevolved. He hits for 11k, and then on the level that you need to evolve him, he can beat it. So the thing with picking up Natsu instead of Dabi is you're picking up a strong mythic that can go upwards to, I believe it, I think it goes all the way up to 27k. I have an evolution method with him as well where you go up to upgrade 10 and stop. But you go up to like 27k and it's bird. So he's probably really hitting for like upwards to 32 to 33k. And that's pretty good numbers for like such a low attack speed. And since he also makes you breeze through one of the stories, he's a really good recommendation from me, especially if Dabi isn't really being nice in the shop, because you don't have to evolve him to beat that level. Now, he doesn't have heal like a Kainu, but the fact that you can do an unevolved Natsu and he can fill the role that Dabi could do if you could find him in the shop. It's kind of like, if you're willing, if you don't have the gems, pick up him, he can get the job done, but you gotta be good. And if you just want to turn off your brain, Natsu can just do it, but it's really expensive. But I'm not going to act like he doesn't also do damage. It's not like Dabi, where Dabi you drop him after you're done with Magic Town. No, you can keep this guy on your squad, and he'll do the damage that you need to do. In fact, when I was doing King, especially during the Jelly dungeons, I would get the King up ready to kill the Owl Mages, and then I would spec Natsu because his damage would scale better. So he's still a pretty solid unit. Just because Magic Town's over, it doesn't mean he isn't good. Next is Crush. Crush is in the same situation as a lot of these other guys. I'll put him at the top of these guys, but Crush is in this like weird situation where he does like 40, 50,000 with his damage, and it's like full AoE, but his attack speed's janky, his cones are janky. He doesn't help you in challenge because everything just has one shield, so it only really comes up in like Magic Town, really. And then because his attacks are so jank, um, man, I'm really even talking myself out of bad and going down the fart, dude. Yeah, I'll just say it. I'm moving him down. The more I'm thinking about it and talking about it, he's a lot worse than we gave him credit for at first, because Magic Town was such cancer. Juzo should have just stayed as my character for that area. Every time I've tried to make Crush work, it's been so flimsy and awkward that I end up having to plop down more Crushes. So for people that don't know what Crush does, on evolution, that means you have to evolve him. If you plop him down, he just deletes shields, like they're gone, which make some of you go, "Wow, that's insane! Like that's really helpful." The thing is maneuvering this guy to actually hit the person with the shields is really fucking annoying. And since his attack speed is so high, sometimes by the time he gets around to actually hitting the unit that he needs to, they only have like 2 shields left. And in some cases, they only have 1 shield. So it just ate his attack, especially if it's like a full AoE. Like a lot of the times, when I have him, I only really seem to like the leash in the what is it, the hard Titan or whatever it is, the armor Titan. Hollow. Yeah, his damage is pretty good, but you're not bringing him on the team for damage. You're bringing him to make him a shield guy, and my issue really with him is its high cooldowns for like 40k attack, which is really good, but it's like this full AoE doesn't hit far enough on certain maps, because like the maps that he could be using his shield crushing thing, like Hollow and all that, he doesn't reach. So units like King, units like ones I'll go into later, will already be hitting the shield unit, and then you'll be waiting on him to actually attack it. So it really only comes up in Magic Town. And I just think you're better off with just Juzo doing his multi-hit, or whatever unit that you have multi-hitting. Because by the time you get to Curse Town, he cannot hit those little shit worms for anything. They spawn too quickly when you're fighting the 50 boss. And even if you're doing the blanket AoE thing, it's kind of like a situation where he's doing that on worms that haven't spawned yet, so you're still waiting on him to hit the next set of worms, so he's missing it. And since a lot of the new meta stuff does multi-hit anyway, you're only shaving off 1 to 2 shields. I found myself immediately scrapping him by the time Curse started, and just trying out other units, because the unit I was actually using, like King and one I'll get into later, were able to just fend off the wanky shields with their multi-hits, rather than me waiting on this cone to cooperate with me. I think if you had him in Magic Town and you still have him, he's decent, and if you can make it work, good for you. But I think the high cost until you can actually get the good AoE for the thing is just like really awkward at times, and I just don't think anybody should be picking him up for the shield crush thing, especially since you have to wait till Magic Town to even get it. However, for infinites and all that other stuff, he's this different side thing, kind of like Killua, but I just don't think he really does enough until we see like something involving shields being more prevalent. For right now, in the cursed infinites things we have to do with eyes and stuff, he's really just shouldn't be on teams anymore. Next is Gray. For me, Gray's in this like weird predicament where he's kind of like expensive Rukia, but at least he can hit the air. But you do have to do like Magic Town, so it's like I usually snipe him as my CC because you can just plop him down for 1300. But every time when I use the CC, I usually only put down 1 a game. So he really should be down here with Armin as this like very leash like one situational awareness thing. But the uh, something that everybody should know is he also hits as hard as Crush, and if he does like if you do plop him down, the fact that you can just kind of freeze land or air for 13 is a pretty nice buy, but it should only really ever come up if dungeons are going south. And if anybody here is actually playing dungeons, you should be going in there more ready. And he shouldn't be a unit that you're kind of grabbing first as your mythic. He should be like one of your last slots that you get, and he can't carry himself in his own level to even evolve him. Yeah. Next is Cell. I kind of wish to save the best for last. But yeah, Cell is the best unit in the game. I'm sorry, guys. For those of you that didn't do the raids, I know some of you might be talking about Izura or whatever her stupid name is. But for those of you that missed out on doing the raids, oh man, you were lied to about this unit being mid. Cause holy cow, did the devs mess up on this one. This unit hits for 13 uh 300, or I can't even say it, 3,300 on placement as a 4 multi hit. I talk about it all the time in all my streams when I'm trying to tell people about how crazy Cell is. But the fact that I can plop down this unit, shave shields, land or air, I can multi hit things with amazing attack speed. Now mine does have Godspeed. Nice. Mine does have Godspeed, but it is kind of like this situation where I do this system of either first wave, I can't place him because 13, but second wave it's like he's still too expensive, so I just plop down the Boma, and depending on the game state, if I'm playing alone, if it's infinite it's different, but if it's like dungeons forever, or for whatever or story, it's place him and have him just take care of the game until I'm done farming, and then he solos the game. Especially on Cursed, he can do that whole first box turn. His method is similar to King's but way more expensive, but the payoff is amazing for doing these. Not only do you get this imperfect cell that can handle a lot of the annoying things of the raid, but then by the time you get to semi-perfect, I'm placing him instead of some of the mythics. And then by the time you get to super perfect or to regular perfect to super perfect is literally just carrying. I'm not even using any other unit. I was kind of already doing that with King. And side by side, I actually really like using them over others, just the hybrid and the hill. But I gotta say, it's pretty insane what his scaling turns into. Which, if we go all the way to Solar Kamehameha, which takes probably like 3 waves of Boma, which sounds like a lot, but a lot of these other scalings on these heavies is, it's actually closer to the 4 to 5s. And they can't hit hill, or they can't do this or that. He goes over to 27k. I believe every 6 for people that don't have Godspeed. I don't like playing favorites with mine. So it's like 6 seconds for 27k. And it's a multi-hit move as well, which like lingers in a giant AoE. Hey, what's up, Ninja? And the thing with that, guys, is especially for the Cursed Dungeon, if you guys are struggling with it or whatever, it gets to the point where you plop down one of these, even if you didn't get the really plop one at the beginning and you're not getting that, you can put him on the end of the level as like an anchor and carry it, or you can put him in the front of the level and be the guy with top damage. Because the only character that's really rivaling him is the Lightning Girl, which you could make the argument that she does do more damage, but she can't break shields on the Dragonfly. So it's kind of like, if you're gonna go with the tech choice of not going super perfect cell or not doing the grind, it's really like get an imperfect cell, which means you still are competent enough to do the raid, so you might as well get the super perfect, but get the imperfect to shave the shields and have the Lightning Girl carry with the actual damage. But my issue with that is Cell is doing a system where you can just run just him. If you're good enough to do the raids for the shield break anyway, you might as well just full commit and get him instead of banking on a unit that is now no longer available. So this like meta game of Cell versus her is kind of like, well, the West City raid isn't going everywhere. So if you miss that unit, that arguably, we can go arguably, because the problem with the people that debate between the two is it never seems like either side has both units. And I have not met a player that doesn't have like a unique Ismail or whatever her name is that has topped me in those. I literally played all those dungeons and I was top DPS throughout the whole thing. If you haven't gotten Cell already, for whatever reason, you need to get on that. That this unit literally, it just pays for himself in so many ways. Like, I am not gassing him because he's a raid, because I have all the raid units. I plop this guy. He's actually quite a challenge to get, Josh. I plop this guy down. Let me just talk about his strengths really quick before the weaknesses. I plop this guy down, guys, and you can even spam 4 and understand this damage really quick. So for 26k, I mean that's for 26k, for 2600, Cell, that means you put down 2 cells, they together hit for 9,000 every like 5 or 6 seconds. Or not 9,000, 6,600 and some change. Okay? Which sounds mediocre, right? Well, that was 2,600 gold. That's all you needed to use. So in comparison, King, who also takes that much with Superior 2, only hits for 4,400. And it's not a multi-hit. So that's practically a whole third stronger, with multi-hit meaning shields. And it also means a longer hitbox, because the first couple blasts could kill your intended target, and then something else will walk in that area and then still take a majority of the blast. Where King will only hit that AoE for the split second, he's still cracked, and Cell somehow makes that cracked unit not look as good anymore. But King is still insane because of the cheap and cost. So it's kind of like these two are battling each other for numbers in the high tiers, and nobody can really even touch them for the cost that you're paying for. The only one you can maybe argue is Coyote, but Coyote is 1,600. So you still gotta wait till like wave 4 to get him out. And then he's only ground. So it just it starts getting janky because both these guys can hit everything. Now I will say the hills get a little awkward with Cell if you want to speed things up with like older maps, but since he solos all those maps, it's more or less a minor inconvenience. And then the other big inconvenience comes with actually being able to beat the raids. Here's my issue with this though. Every raid unit, when you're doing it, especially during the buzzer, has a crowd of people standing in front of it. Now, the thing with this is, if you go with a crowd, you're more than likely winning. Even if you don't, as long as you're trying your best, you should be fine. Okay? Unless you guys go in as full noobs, but you shouldn't be. And what will happen is after you do like a couple of those raids, you get imperfect Cell. And by the time you're getting imperfect Cell, you've learned the routes and you're helping with at least the shields. And as the metagame gets stronger, more people that are doing these raids are finding them easier to do. And eventually, after you do this grind, you'll have enough for not only Cell, but any other problems you're having with the game, you'll be able to add it to your team and you'll be done with everything. You'll be caught up for getting this unit if you make this pilgrimage. It's quite a large one. It's not for the faint of heart, which is why King is right beside him and not a whole tier down. But for what he gives to you, it's insane. Like, none of the new units, I'm not spoiling the rest of the list, but none of the new units do that. They're all the same old, do a lot of work for this insane power that's basically going down the toilet of infinite and not really helping you with your game states. It's turning a 50 infinite into a 60 infinite, where Cell on his own is giving you the 50. Next, Trunks, L for Lucy. L for Lucy. Now, the same raid as Cell. Can you believe these two are complete polar opposites? I cannot believe that you can't craft Trunks. You cannot craft him. You can't craft him. You have to hope for RNG. He's not a burn unit. And his damage is subpar for when you get him. He hits as hard as Cell would if you only got him to the Solar Kamehameha and stopped. Cell practically hits double him, and you have to rely on more luck with Trunks. You need 200 just to get the time machine. Then you need to hope that you got 4 while doing that pilgrimage, which it is not guaranteed. Everyone's happy when they get them, but it's not guaranteed. And everybody that I've ever seen use them has dropped them as quickly as they've gotten them, as like a novelty. Like, look, I got Trunks, and then they never use them because his DPS is so low. Where Cell, every person that has Cell uses them. Not too many people have them though. Now Trunks, it's a little harsher, but you guys have to understand it is an RNG drop, and RNG drop plus the fact that you could just use your time getting this unit instead of this unit is kind of like night and day, especially side by side. Next is Meg. I'm actually gonna put Meg kind of high here, guys. I'm gonna put Meg here. Now the thing with Meg is Meg actually unevolved kind of sucks. However, after you evolve this unit, he's hitting for around like 40,000 damage, and he applies Curse. And he's one of the most easiest new units to snipe right now, and all he does is make everything kind of easier with damage. So let's say, for instance, we're now in Curse, and I have Cell, and I pick up Meg. Meg now makes it so that Cell wrecks everything, and then like no scuffed levels anymore. The problem with Meg though is on his own he's not terrific, but the fact that you go like that he's one of the newer units, and you have to like do all this work in these areas anyway. He will be the one that you should pour your new cursed energy stuff into, so that you can just make your infinites and everything easier without having to invest too much time and resources into it. You should not pick him up first. He's mainly this high because he hits as hard as people like Crush, Gone, and all that stuff because of like his CC and power. His CC works on his own attacks. So when you curse something and hit it for 37 and you attack it again, the next attack will do 42. So overall, he's hitting for around 80k after 2 strikes. So, and that doesn't include the players around him. And you already see where Blackbeard, where is he? He should be really lower. Yeah, Blackbeard, who's a couple tiers lower than him as a legendary, is already scaled that high for just providing that CC. Now, imagine if Blackbeard could hit as hard as Doo over here, or even like closer to Gone. He doesn't hit air, which makes him like worse than Gone in that regard. But the thing is you can just plop him down and he's already hitting for around like 16, and then that is a curse, which would make the next attack hit for around 2,000. Which, for just smacking down in the middle of anything, is just overall great. Now, it is more of like a quality of life thing, so it makes me want to put him in the lower portions, but because he's one of the easiest cursed new units to snipe, it's kind of like, if you snipe him, especially after your team is done, you can evolve him, and it will just make whatever unit you were using to carry yourself carry easier. Because you only really need one unit holding it down. So let's make it a different example. King with Meg. King struggles in Curse. However, if he had Meg's Curse, it makes it so that King and Meg can do the level without these like scuff situations with boosting and horses. It will just make it so that the levels are easy. Or if you give it to Cell and Cell's killing the guy at the door, especially in Infinites, it would only need both of them to probably hit 50. Next is Gojo, and okay, guys, I've been waiting to kind of talk about Gojo. Gojo, I'm not gonna put in a trash tier, okay, but I do need to say this about Gojo. Gojo is bad, and the reason why he's bad is because for a large majority of people that play this game, it's just like a Gon situation, except Gon can hit air, but Gojo can freeze time at any upgrade. But the problem with Gojo is unless you're willing, if you think Cell's grind's bad, unless you're willing to sit in Infinites for actual days to give this guy ludicrous numbers, you will only ever see unevolved Gojo. And unevolved Gojo and even base evolved Gojo don't do very well until they start getting a lot of eyes. And once they get those eyes, they have such ludicrous numbers at like 8 and everything that it's really like Gojo's that unit that you should snipe after you get everything you need for this update so that you can make the next update that's coming free. But the problem with that is they do buffs in this game, meaning the possibility of nerfs exists. Alright? They already even tweaked how you obtain these eyes. It used to be story 4 through 6. And it may have been infinite as well. But it could have been both. And they switched it to specifically infinite only. And the problem with infinite only is you really only have around a 30% chance of getting this unit's eyes before wave 50. And the thing with that is you have to be able to get there for this 10% drop. So if you can get there already, Gojo's absurd power is no different than Aaron's. You don't even necessarily need it. However, if you do put all this work and grind into the Gojo, he can even surpass Cell on this tier list as an omniscient character that hits harder than anything. Not air. Okay, can't forget about air. He doesn't do that. But it's kind of like he just turns into the ultra strong placement that Gon could be doing. And all you'd have to do to get Gon to do that is go to Ant Kingdom and evolve him or whatever. Where Gojo, you kind of got to get like a full team of mythics to make this stuff happen anyway. You kind of already have to be a god, and then his godly presence just makes things rougher. Or makes things easier for somebody that's already got it easy. I do think inevitably grinding for his like eyes and everything is perfect to make the next area a joke, but to say he's above all is ridiculous because he has weaknesses still. He shouldn't have weaknesses if he's infinite above all. And those weaknesses are not just tailored to grinding either. Next is Sukino. I actually think this unit's a little underrated. I don't know all the stuff around him, but he hits like a bus like around 60,000. And the thing is about him is you just need to grab the mythic and then play some infinites, and then you can just go. If you can do the infinites to get the keys, then getting this guy is actually free. So it's a good recommendation for me. It's like Meg, ease of access and great damage, but I still think that going for these other guys is a little bit better. Next is Yuto. Yuto's in the similar situation to Gojo, where he's more of like a leaderboard situation, except unless his ring will come in Bulma shop. I don't know if it's going to be in the Bulma shop or not. He's pretty much a waste if you could do all those dungeons. It's 200, guys. Even though his damage is ludicrous, it is not worth it. And then for the rest of them, these are all mythics. Or these are all limited, so they're not even really worth talking about. Every time I place them, people get mad. Lulu's too hard to get, and the rest of them you kind of can't get anymore. They are untiered. And that's of the list. Any questions I will answer after I use the restroom.